I have another student coming up, Mark Cantor, someone I've been speaking with off and on, someone I've gotten to know. I'm very excited to share, bring him on and talk to him and let him share his story with all of you. Mark Cantor, welcome.
Thank you. Very glad to be here today.
Thank you for taking the time out of your day to do so. So I wanted you on here because if you could just sort of share a little bit about your background and then how you connected with the Torch organization.
Terrific. Well, I've been listening to Rabbi Yaakov Wolbe's podcast for a bit over a year now, and I've been dropping in on the Zoom study sessions for a bit less than a year.
Okay.
In terms of my background, just a quick backgrounder, I grew up in a not too observant household, in a conservative synagogue, in a community that was becoming more and more secular, and my family was part of that trend. My great-grandfather had been the rabbi at my synagogue in the late 1800s and early 1900s when it had been an Orthodox shul. And he was the founder of a still existing Midwestern yeshiva called Yeshiva Beit Yehuda. But notwithstanding that fact that he was an Orthodox rabbi of an Orthodox shul and an Orthodox yeshiva, his progeny was part of a great shift in the mid-1900s away from strict Torah observance. And the environment in which I was raised was culturally Jewish, but not too observant. I personally joined a Reform synagogue when my now 25-year-old daughter was 2 because of the preschool. I'm still a member at that same synagogue, and actually I still like it for various parts of it.
Right.
But over the past 2 years, I experienced really an increased interest and curiosity regarding the more observant areas of Judaism. And I was frustrated by the learning opportunities at my own synagogue. I began exploring other sources, other synagogues, of course, YouTube, the internet, podcasts. And at some point in time, I crossed paths with Rabbi Wolbe's podcast. And my first exposure, I remember very clearly, was Torah 101.
Right.
And the first exposure in Torah 101 was the coverage of the 13 principles of faith. And my own take on it, I was quite enthralled. I think at the time he had maybe 6 or 7 that were already published, 6 or 7 of those 13 principles.
Right.
And I burned through them. I listened to all of them really fast. Was really enjoying it. And my own take on it was, this was the real deal. It was fully in-depth content, great depth.
Right.
But unlike similar content I'd crossed paths with previously, there was no, I don't know, I guess the word is yeshivish. It felt like a physician explaining in full detail a medical issue, but using lay language, not medical jargon. It was presented in a way that I, without Yiddish and without all that much Hebrew, could completely engage with the topic. And that single fact is what initially hooked me into listening to Rabbi Wolbe podcasts, that there was this great depth, but in other similar types of podcasts I heard, it was difficult to engage with it because there was so much kind of Hebrew thrown in and just some kind of assumption that the listenership would understand Hebrew and some of the language.
Yeah,
and the course itself was great. I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. I love that. I mean, several things. You're right. I mean, a lot of the real authentic Torah teaching is from yeshiva students in yeshiva language. So, whenever I'm like in the community, I always have to have a translator sitting next to me. But that's one of the things that these rabbis are great at, is just breaking it down in language for those of us who didn't grow up in it. And the other thing you think, you touched on, I think a lot of us are the same situation where we may have grown up culturally Jewish, which is great because it is a rich culture, but there's something else like we were like searching for. And then when you start hearing this in-depth analysis on things like the Torah 101, why the principles of faith, why we know Torah is true, these type things, I've seen similar experience what you've experienced. For myself, other people, it's like addicting. You can't stop listening to it because it's what our soul is yearning. It's like I think our neshama knows the truth. It's just been trying to get our intellect to catch up with it. And when you have that information, it brings some reconciliation between those areas of our mental faculties. Would you sort of agree with that sort of?
I would. Would you just, again, staying with this Torah 101 kind of set of podcasts that I'd heard, I went through the proof for the revelations on Sinai that happened, the proof for the divine nature of the Torah, the proof of the factual nature of the Mishnah, the soul and what happens to the soul after it leaves our body and how our choices impact, that part, this whole notion of the soul and what happens to the soul, I think for non-Torah observant Jews is a complete mystery.
Right.
There's the notion of the soul is our people don't believe in hell and we're not really sure about heaven, and there's a lot of lack of clarity is kind of the way clergy even will talk about it in the non fully observant world, and in fact in the fully observant world there's a very crystal clear set there's a very crystal clear construct, if you will, in terms of where the soul goes, what happens, what are the levers that are impact what happens to someone, once their soul leaves their body. It was, all of this was really captivating to me and really pulled me in to this experience, which then I followed up with, because what's great about Rabbi Wolbe, which is, it's kind of hard to even imagine, but he finishes every podcast and he says, everybody, here's my email address. Email me if you want to have a question. I think in some cases he even leaves his phone number. I know that. Yeah. So he said, call me. So I don't know how many people listen and I don't know how many people call, but he must be spending an inordinate amount of time responding to these emails. And I emailed him at some point and he responded and we got into this whole discussion. And from there, I really got drawn into the Torch world, where now I'm studying with a couple of different individuals in the Torch world, and I listen to the podcast and I participate in a Zoom class once a week, and it's really made an enormous impact in my life. And the breadth of it, I feel like it's been like a year now, like I've really slowly, I don't want to overstate it, but that I really am getting an education in this breadth of Jewish life, from everything from a very deep dive on the Parsha podcast to the mitzvahs to Torah 101 to Jewish history. And I just assume Yaakov Wolbe doesn't sleep, but he's creating an enormous amount of content.
We don't let him sleep.
Yeah.
He's handcuffed to his desk right now. He only gets small little breaks, because I know he does get lots of emails, but he returns every one of them. He loves answering the questions. He wants the students to be engaged. Yeah. And you touched on something else too, that, this whole idea of, whether there's a soul and what is its journey here. A lot of the world, even in the Jewish world, it's void of that. You never hear anything about that, when really the whole Torah is the story of a soul. That's all it is a roadmap of. And when we lack that understanding, it's unsettling. I think when we get that clarity from Torah, it's exactly what's showing us that we existed before we came to this world, will exist after we come out of this world. This world serves a very big purpose. And when we start to get that clarity through learning Torah, it allows us to maximize what we're doing on a day-to-day basis in the opportunity of this world. Would you sort of agree with that sort of summation?
I would say, first of all, yes. It's a bit of a mystery to me why or how the theology of Reform Judaism, and I believe conservative Judaism as well, has largely left that topic to the side. But it's the heart of, yes, it's the heart of Judaism. It's the heart of what this question is that we're addressing, and I've just received so much information and bits of wisdom and comfort from learning from the Rabbi Wolbe and others in Torch regarding how our lives directly impact what happens next and what we can do to impact that in a positive way.
Amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it's really remarkable.
And this shows the need for this organization because, there's several things that have been said over the last day and a half. One, I was mentioning how Rabbi Cohen said that he quoted the Rabbi lived back in the 50s, very prominent rabbi, who said that, there are no evil Jews in our generation. There are just what's called captive children. And that's really all we've become. Like your grandfather, or was it your great grandfather? Yeah. Everyone, if they go back further enough up their family tree, at some point they're going to hit Torah observant Jews, in their, and just sort of to break apart as we start to span out in the exile of these countries. And we maybe give up a little bit to engage with the secular world for business or whatever, but we allowed ourselves to some degree to become a little bit assimilated by it. And now it's sort of that era where all we are is captive children, and these rabbis are here day in and day out trying to free us from that captivity. And what brings us that freedom is our heritage, which is the Torah. So is there any other words you would like to share with those listening on, why they should go to givetorch.com and support this organization?
No, I completely agree with what you just said. I think Torch is, as someone who was actively seeking information about Judaism, I think Torch is completely unique. I think it reaches people in a way that I haven't found any other organization to reach, to be that impactful, and it does it with its enthusiasm and with its one-to-one relationship building, where every person, it's building a relationship with every person, bringing them in, and I think in terms of content, you may know the answer to this, but I don't know how many podcasts Rabbi Wolbe has created, Rabbi Yaakov Wolbe, leaving aside his brother.
Yeah.
But it's this body of content, and it's building and building and building. And I think what you have in Houston is a wellspring of Judaism. It's a modern day equivalent of what Lithuania was 150 years ago, and other kind of well-known wellsprings of Judaism. And I cannot think of a better organization to donate to. Certainly,
thank you
for
so
anybody
much,
who
Mark.
cares about Judaism.
I greatly appreciate you sharing that story. I will tell you that I see Rabbi Yaakov Wolbe's notes on Shabbos for like his next podcast. He doesn't wing anything. He researches everything in depth to find new content. Even if he did a partial podcast a year prior, he wants all new ideas. the next time around.
I'm sorry. I know you got to. Do I have a minute to say something?
No, yeah, I'm good. Keep going.
The only comment I was going to make was just the Parsha podcast themselves, where they now, because he's been doing this for years, he has every week he puts up a Parsha podcast. It's just a basic, I say just, but it's a 1 hour overview of the Parsha, and it's the story of the Parsha and some deeper dives on various topics, but it's basically an overview. Then now each week he has a new Parsha podcast on the same Parsha where he'll dive in, and it's great. It's the Talmudic stories, he'll take a particular topic. I made a note about one, Mishpatim. He says he does an entire podcast that's essentially a deep dive into one phrase, Na'aseh v'neshama. We will do and we will listen. And talks about the various Talmudic views of that phrase. And the book of Shabbos, page 88, 600,000 angels each gave 2 crowns to each Jew, and they each had 2 crowns, and then there was the golden calf, and 1.2 million angels came back and took them back. And he goes on, and it goes into Ruvah and Ruvah's notion of the we will do and we will listen. But it's a level of depth that is, for the most part, unavailable to people like me. To people like me, what is available is the overview, is the 1 hour overview, and to get it to be able to really spend time and understand just a taste of the commentary is just lovely. That's it. I'll leave you with that.
Thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate it. It was a pleasure talking with you.
My pleasure.
And we appreciate your support so much, and your listenership to the podcast, your participation in the classes. I know Rabbi Yaakov Wolbe loves whenever you guys speak one-on-one. So thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay, thanks. You too.